Hi, this is the show that answers the questions that expats, nomads, and full-time travelers living across the globe ask themselves every day. These insights and secrets are shared when we interview experts and authors from across the globe.
Hi, everybody. Our new guest today is Helen Ellis. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you very much. It's fantastic to be here, and thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so thrilled. I've looked forward to this conversation for a very long time. Helen is a New Zealand researcher. She's an author, she's an anthropologist, and she's also the founder of the distantfamilies.com. 3 of her 4 children and 6 of her 7 grandchildren, live between 16 and 30 hours away by flight. So our conversation today is really going to be centered around, tell me more. Tell us more about you and your great work that you're doing.
Oh, well, it sort of all started over 30 years ago because I got married for the second time, and we had this really odd family at the wedding. My 2 were about 3 and 4 years old, and my husband's children were something like 19 and 20. So you can imagine we looked a really odd family. Anyway, so from quite an early age, I became a distant stepmother. I was only like 30, and my 21-year-old stepson went off to England, and he's been there ever since. So and then my kids lived overseas, and my stepdaughter went away for quite some time. I have my stepson was married to an English girl. My stepdaughter married a Scotsman. My daughter married an American/Irishman, and my son has married an American. And all these kids are all over the world. So we have a really unusual package. And because I started this whole grandparenting thing quite early on, I realized that I had a unique package of experience. My youngest grandchild was only born just before Christmas, and he's in Chicago, but my oldest one is 24 years old. So some grandparents might just have little kids and be coming from that perspective. But when I realized that there wasn't much out there for the whole spectrum, I thought, Helen, there's a gap here. So that led me to do my master's on the topic. I got challenged. Come on, Helen, you can do this. And I'm, okay, as a mature student. And then that led to me realizing there was a real gap in mainstream reading about this topic. And that's when I realized that there were gaps between knowledge and gaps of what's shared over the kitchen table. And that's why I've gone on to commit to writing a book series, writing about how it is for each generation of distance families. So the grandparents, the expat sons and daughters who go away, and then the grandchildren. And that's been my humongous task for this season of my life. And it's been very rewarding. So that's how I've ended up doing what I'm doing. So I'm not a nomad, and I haven't lived in multiple countries, but I would like to think I have an appreciation of everything that everybody goes through. Though right now, I was away for 2 months over Christmas, overseas. We've come home. We've got the house on the market. We're going away in May and June for 5 weeks. We don't know where we'll be living after that. And we've bought an apartment we're moving into at the end of August. So there is a bit of nomadic stuff happening in my life. So
there's a lot of change, And, I think Nomadic Diaries tries to appeal to both short and long-term expats. Mm-hmm. And I think that what I see in the shorter nomadic experiences of people who are, picking up homes or selling their houses, putting their belongings in storage or selling everything, it seems to be a huge pattern, mostly in America, but also in other countries. And so I believe that your message is deeply needed because this is something they haven't thought about.
Well, often they leave home and they don't really think about these aspects. And I know I devote time to coming up with ideas of things to do because it can make a difference. When someone's leaving or they're moving from place to place, you're thinking about visas and jobs and where you're going to live and schooling. maybe kind of forget about mum and dad back home.
Well, yeah, so you're so full of adventure. You really are launching yourself.
Yes,
And
yes.
so to launch yourself takes so much energy that I think there's not a lot of time spent on this particular topic. So help us understand distance grandparenting. Can you name 2 or 3 of the top challenges that you see most people face?
From the grandparent-parent perspective back
Yes,
home,
please.
yes. I think it is because this is not what they imagined. I have a saying, they never told me that at antenatal class. When you take that little bundle along to be measured and weighed the first time, and you don't imagine that bundle's going to grow up and go and live somewhere else, especially allowing for the fact that the grandparents we're talking about are generally the baby boomer generation, and they didn't grow up with everybody going all around the world. I mean, most of them grew up and you got a boat from A to B. You didn't even fly. So it's not what they've seen. It's not what they've generally observed. And now they have to adjust the fact that their children have gone away. But as I remind them, they probably said to them, you can do anything, dream big.
We did.
Take on the world. And I have to say, and by the way, it might include another country. So I think that's the hardest thing, is the fact that it's not really what they imagined. And the challenges arise, lots of different challenges, but it's hardest when they haven't got to a point of acceptance. And from there, they can move on and get creative about how they're going to do this. That is what I'm trying to encourage those distance grandparents and distance parents, because often their children can go and there aren't any grandchildren on the scene. So, they can be simply the parents, is to come to a place of acceptance. And once you come to a place of acceptance, then you've got space in your brain to be creative about, okay, this is the case. How are we going to do this? How are we going to make this work? And that's a really good place to get to.
Yeah, that sounds very, very practical. Some of the challenges I think I'm slightly aware of, because I was a distance grandparent for a short time, and I am a distance grandparent now. So I really look forward to learning how to narrow that gap, because it's always... It always will be present as long as we make the choices that we make.
I guess it's important to realize that the type of relationship you're going to have is a different one from the children that may be down the road. Full stop. Like, it's different, okay? Doesn't necessarily mean it's worse or whatever. It's a different relationship. And accepting that is a really worthwhile thing to do. And then realizing what you can do and what you can't do. Yeah. And understanding that there are gatekeepers in between here, the parents in the middle, as to, how often they make it possible to chat, and what the time zones are, and the boundaries, and the relationship you've got with them, and, how often you see each other. So there are boundaries and barriers. And so then you accept all of that and then go, okay, what can I do with what I've got left? And then make the most of it and realize what your limitations are, and the type of grandmother that you are. If you're an arty-farty, crafty grandmother, will do arty-farty, crafty things, Yes. Or if you're a gardening grandmother, you do grandmother, that sort of thing. Don't try and do everything that everybody shows you on Instagram. Do what you are, what's your thing, because you've only got little windows of opportunity.
And so do you suggest that people do this by writing a list of their natural gifts and talents or their interests, and then asking their kids to interview their grandchildren? Or how do you do this in practice?
I think do what's naturally your thing, right, to start off with. I mean, I'm not a crafty person. You see things, do little finger puppets on the screen.
Not happening.
Create stories. No, that's not me, But so, and every child is different, what's good for them and what their age is. So, I started from a very early time doing those photo books that, you can do them online and you just dump a photo, and, they could be hard cardboard ones. And I do that, I will do them before I go somewhere on a trip and say, we're coming and this is what we're going to do. And then I'll do one when I get home. I can do that. That's not hard, and I don't do Photoshop or anything. It's very simple. I do a few cooking things. So now I have cooking things that are, if Nana's coming, there's got to be whatever, certain things in the suitcase. So I think, to answer your question, do what you do naturally at home with any grandchildren that are at home. If it generally works there, it's probably going to work on the other side of the ocean as well. But obviously different ages, different phases of things you're going to have to do. We've transitioned from, because we've got these older grandkids, there was one stage, where everybody wanted me to go on the water slide at the park place. It's like, come on, Helen, it's not my thing, but now the same kids want to go to the steak restaurant and have red wines. I can do that.
Yeah, and it really speaks to the willingness of the grandparent, right? And how you can find those matches and where you can find that synchronicity. And merging that, I think, is the secret.
Yes.
So can you talk to us a little bit about connection, and how do you have a recommendation? Is there a science of this, of how much time or how many touches a month you need? Is there anything out there that gives us any kind of guidelines?
Well, I think, first of all, I can tell you, it's not, I don't know if it's an official piece of research, but if you're talking with children, and kind of expert told me that you can expect to get the number of minutes attention from them that relate to their age. So if they're 5 years old, you can probably get 5 minutes if you're really lucky. Now, it helps if it's not right on dinner time and they're not scratchy and tired. I have a grandchild in the States who has ADHD. So that's one guideline. The other guideline is that there are some families that just want to chat all the time, and they've got maybe the daughter, the expat daughter's got the laptop open on the kitchen bench, and there's stuff coming and going, and phones are ringing, and she's getting dinner ready and talking to her mother at the same time, maybe. So there's this quantity, while others really want the quality, and they want you to sit down, put everything else away. We'll wait till the kids have got to bed. We want your undivided attention. But I think that the overall principle is to think of that person in the circus who's got the pole, and at the top of the pole is a plate, and they just little spins keep that plate spinning. And if you forget about it, then it's going to fall over and break. So if you take the attitude that you're just going to keep spinning it gently on, and create a rhythm. There's actually a term academics use of soft routines. This is an academic term. A soft routine is most Sunday nights, we generally catch up.
Nice.
We all know that it doesn't work every Sunday night because there might be something else on. But overall, most Sunday nights we catch up. So that means that if it's Tuesday back at home and the parents, grandparents think of something and they really want to tell their child, their overseas child or their overseas grandkids, they're not too anxious because they know come Sunday they can talk to them, and they'll get a post-it note out and make a little note so they don't forget. So it takes the anxiety, the mystery, the when will we chat again, anxiety out of the system, because you know that come Sunday you're probably going to connect. Yeah. So I think that's the secret, is to keep a rhythm, keep it flowing.
Yes. Yes, because structure really gives us a container. We coaches love containers, and everything is a container, or it's organized and it's moving forward. And so that is really helpful. And if we could talk about the role of technology, because when I went to Japan with my daughter, I was living in California, my parents were in Scotland, and we went to Japan when she was 2. But we didn't have, it was before internet. So tell us about today's experience, and how much should we be using tech? Is it a good thing?
Well, I think it's amazing, really. I mean, we just have so much more. We're touching base so much more. We can do it in so many different ways. But it still has its limitations that you have to accept, especially when it comes to children. On the opposite side of the world to New Zealand is England. So we had, my grandkids that are in their 20s there, I mean, obviously at the beginning we didn't have the internet or anything. So technology was all very well, but we always had either an 11-hour or 13-hour difference depending on daylight saving.
Yes.
Well, when they're little, they have to go to bed early, or they're getting up and heading off to school. So we just had great years where it didn't matter what the technology was. You couldn't talk to them. And it's the same if you're, say, in the Americas and you're dealing with Asia. It's 12 hours roughly. So little children, it makes absolutely no difference at all.
Right.
So you do have these little sessions, but then you also have to realize that when you start to talk with the grandkids, they might be in the background in the kitchen and you might be talking to your daughter or son, and the daughter or son says, "Do you want to talk to Nana?" And they go, "No." You can't get offended.
No, you can't.
The same thing would have happened if you'd visited the grandkids down the road. Come and see, grandma and talk to her in the lounge room. No, I want to watch this program. So the same things happen. But what is magic is that you can take advantage of what you can when you can.
Yes.
And there are times when it's possible to get a children's book, maybe a favorite local book. You buy a copy, send one to the other side of the world, and that child, you can read that book to them on the screen, and they're following it. I've only yesterday, I finally started doing those little recorded things on my phone and sending a little chat. My daughter started doing that in America just to save time, to save typing.
Yes.
I can do that. Fantastic. I mean, I'm sure there are others that have been doing it for years, but I finally got, come on, Helen, get with the program. You can do this. And brilliant, fantastic, saved typing, So I think you find the things that work for you. I think the grandparents back home really need to make an effort and learn how to do these things. The ones that don't, they miss out big time.
Yes.
Really, really big time. So if at least one half of a grandparent couple is prepared to make it happen, then you'll keep that communication up. But the written word is so valuable, our grandchildren don't know what it's like to receive a letter in the mail. They've never received a bank statement or anything. So I can only stress how important the written word is. I tell expat sons and daughters, I say, when you finally clear up your parents' possessions, when they've finally passed, you will find a chocolate box of letters and cards that were sent to you. But I maintain the same happens in reverse. If you, as a grandparent, send a letter to your grandchildren, they don't throw it out either.
No.
They savor it. They take it off to their bedroom. They read it in their own sweet time, and they file it away somewhere, and they don't throw it out.
That is a super suggestion.
Yeah.
Because that's a way to build connection. And it's also a way to use normal or other I don't want to call them old-fashioned skills, just a different way of communicating, which I think when we do that, for kids who are on screens all the time, to have something as lively and energetically beautiful as a piece of mail is really special.
Yes.
So thank you for that. Do you have any other comments on the technology or any other ways you think we can use it?
One of the key points, I think, with grandchildren is the one-on-one conversations. I think if the expat parents can make this happen, and not necessarily, one of the pieces of advice I give to expats or, couples or singles that are leaving their country to go and live somewhere else, I suggest that they get a rhythm going before they even leave of the grandkids actually Zooming or FaceTiming the grandparents, and they haven't even left the country.
I think that's really smart.
Yeah. And thinking about the time zone differences and doing it at the time that's likely to be the time that the grandparents will receive that call once they've gone away. So there's a rhythm, you're getting a rhythm going. And tell those kids, if those kids are old enough and clever enough to connect with all their friends online, they can definitely connect with their grandparents. So say, okay, guys, this is your job. We're moving abroad, and your job, once a month, once every 6 weeks, whatever, you need to reach out to Nana and Granddad, and you need to make a time, and this is your job.
So it also enrolls them in the process of how they're going to be behaving when they arrive, so that they're not surprised or blindsided by, oh, I still have to talk to them.
And, I relate it back. I have been a grandparent in country as well. So I've had 2 grandchildren here. They're now in their early 20s as well. So I've done all the grandparenting thing, and they live just 20 minutes away. So I would often have to pick them up from kindergarten or pick them up from school or whatever. And so you get in this conversation in the car. So you're both looking ahead. You're not looking at each other. We would have really cool conversations about all sorts of things that they don't necessarily chat to their parents about. And we're not looking at each other, because I'm driving. And that's magic.
Yes.
Those are magic moments. And that's what the distant grandchildren can definitely have with their distant grandparents. And it's much better if it's something they organise and they've come to expect, and it's going to happen. I can tell you that some are better at it than others, and that's okay, because everything's a numbers game, and kids are kids and whatever. But if it's put out there that this is something you do, then it becomes a norm for more of them. And they will talk about things that they don't talk to their parents about. It's really special, and that's where the relationships grow. That is the greatest gift for a distant grandparent, is one-on-one contact with their own children and with the grandchildren.
Yes, and with the grandchildren. Lovely. Now, talk to me about tradition and family traditions. How do you navigate things like Christmas? Do you have any tips or hints for our expat and nomad parents on how to handle those times?
I think, and there's so many of them, the Thanksgivings and all these others, which are culturally different depending on where you come from. We don't experience those. Once again, I think it's just an acceptance that you're not all going to be together. And sometimes, one can go in one direction or one can go in the other, but that is really problematic if you're talking northern hemisphere to southern hemisphere, because all the school holidays are all different, and it's impossible, to have a length
seasons
of time.
are different. So
the seasons are different.
Different experience.
School holidays are different. So it's very difficult to have that time one-on-one. So I think it's a case of just doing the best with what you can. And it means for the grandparents, if they want to go on a cruise at Christmas, they can go on a cruise at Christmas, because
they're not tied down.
They're not tied down. Look on the bright side. You can do other things in other ways, but of course, you make an effort to talk on the day. You make an effort to send presents or vouchers, or maybe have a meal where sometimes people like to put the laptop at the table. You might sit down, and we've tried that, but it just doesn't feel right when I'm sitting there with a glass of red and my granddaughter's got cornflakes in front of her. That I'm just like, it's
awkward. It's awkward.
It's awkward. So I've tried it, but I know I can understand that it would work better for somebody where the time zone was a little bit closer. It's whether it's birthdays, Thanksgiving, you missed graduation ceremonies. All you can do is the best that you can do, and everybody try and just accept that that's how it is. The baby that's born.
Yes, when you're not there. So what I hear you saying is this acceptance piece is huge. In fact, the acceptance piece, it sounds to me, is the biggest obstacle. Would you agree with that?
Yes, it is the biggest obstacle for the grandparents, because, assuming it's the children that have gone, then, they've made the big decision, they've decided where to go, and that's fine. And when I talk to the grandparents, I explain to them that it's called the 3 H's. And I call it the language of progressive acceptance of distance grandparenting. So level 1, H is for harmful. And the parents and grandparents say, how dare you take my grandchild to the other side of the world? What's wrong with this country? Do we not have any say on that decision? That is harmful language. It's a natural response, but it's so destructive. And those words are never forgotten. They need to move it to another level. And the next level is H for human. And it's where they say, oh, I miss you so much. I feel the distance. I just want to be there and give you a hug. I wish you could come home for a visit. So that is human. It's honest. It's understandable, but it's best shared with their friends, not their family. So the best level is H for helpful. And that's when the parents and grandparents are saying, this is your decision and I respect your choices. I'm proud of you and I will keep loving and supporting you from afar. And that is wisdom that will reap benefits. And the interesting thing about that is that when those parents and grandparents are way back in level 1 or level 2, the harmful human ways, then their children overseas don't share as much. They're out of the loop because it's too hard. So I have shared that information with the grandparents, and some of them have said to me, I'm level 2. I need to do something about that.
Yes, because that allows for a more, a better sort of a field of play for everyone to be on the same page and communicating more honestly with each other. So I do have a question that I thought about, and that is for all these grandparents that we're seeing now, or in the last 3 years, 4 years since COVID, who have decided that they have worked all of their lives and they deserve to have an adventure, to see the world. And they're the ones that are making the choice to leave the kids and the grandkids. How do you recommend that they deal with grandparenting guilt?
It's interesting because one of those lines that's so relevant to these people is, I'm sick of shoveling snow.
Yes.
And I had that experience just gone in January. I shoveled snow in Chicago for my son. And it just made me think about this. I thought that's why they all go to Florida. It all makes sense. Well, I guess the acceptance has to be all in reverse. It's the family at home that has to have the acceptance. It is really hard to adjust. But sometimes when I gather that sometimes when they go away, they're actually quite pleased to be going away, and they're actually quite happy to have a bit of distance because maybe they've been asked to babysit so much they just don't feel they can manage it. And this is a way of coping. And others do it for their health. And when you start to get arthritis and dodgy hips and you start to go, I don't want to feel all achy. So I guess that it's quite common when those situations apply, when people are going to the sun, whether it's, the northern states in America and Canada and Florida, or whether it's England and New Zealand. There's quite a lot of this swapping around in the seasons. There's a lot of traffic in April and September as people go in different directions. So we have grandparents that come to New Zealand from, say, England or Europe and spend half a year here, just the same as somebody from Florida might go to.
Like snowbirds.
Like the Florida ones go to New Jersey or whatever. There's all that. So that's a possible compromise, if there's some sort of way of having a wing of a house or what we call a granny flat or something. But I guess the situation is that you have to factor in, if you're going to make that move, you have to factor in financially and in your timetable how you're going to grandparent and have a plan. And say, well, I expect that the grandkids will fly down and some school holidays, save you having to pay for summer camps. My daughter in the States has figured out It's cheaper to send her kids to New Zealand than pay for summer camps.
Oh,
And
really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So we're working on that when they get a bit older, have the
Yes.
plan ready. And the other important thing, and I tell that when our children leave home, I say to them, don't leave that decision telling your parents to the last minute. And the same applies for the grandparents who may then go and live somewhere else, go and follow the sun. Don't tell them when it's all done.
Yes.
Sit them down and say, you know what? I didn't know that I'd ever do this. I didn't know that we would ever think about this, but this is where our heads are at. We don't know if it's going to happen. We're going to go for a little trip in 2 weeks' time and check things out. We're talking to our financial planner. We've had a chat with a real estate agent. We're just thinking about it. You're planting a seed. You're getting them to start to adjust their thinking. And if they don't adjust, well, you have to go, just like our kids went.
Exactly. And so by inviting them, you're enrolling them in the process.
Yes.
And you're also signaling that that relationship is precious.
Yes.
And you want to find a container that you can continue to carry it in while you're gone. Because many of these people have never left the States for great adventures, but are traveling so much now, and sometimes from country to country to country. And it seems to me that's a wonderful opportunity to teach your grandparents or share with them about geography. What is your perspective on that?
Definitely. I mean, wherever you're going, you're learning new things as you're going to different countries, and you can share that with your grandkids and pick up really interesting books along the way. And, and maybe they can come and fly and join you sometime if finances stretch to that sort of thing. And the postcards come from all sorts of exotic places. And maybe you could give them a map of the world and a box of pins, and they could see where Nana and Granddad or Grandma are. It could be exciting for them. The kids think it's quite exciting, that you're all over the place and doing different things. And most of the time they're delighted for you, because I think, especially for Americans, as I understand it, as a worker in America, you don't get much leave. There's very little vacation leave compared to other nations. So that travel ends up happening later in life because you haven't had the opportunities. I think it's hardest for Americans because they're the ones who suffer the most through their working life, through lack of holiday time. Vacation time. Yeah,
I would agree with that. And many of our listeners are from the US, but they are from all over the world, from I think 38 countries at this point. So it's very important to be, I think, geographic centric in your thinking about this as well, and how you're going to manage it. So let's just switch channels a little bit here. Can you tell us about what does the research reveal about emotional impact of distant families over the course of time?
I think what I found in my research is that one is that relationships are different, but they don't have to, the whole distance family thing is not a recipe for a disaster in a family. It can be, you can thrive.
Great news, everyone. Listen to this.
I have a whole chapter in being a distant son and daughter that, this is not a national disaster. This can be really cool because if everybody's got the right attitude. Yes, there are losses, and I think there are different emotions that are felt. The parents and grandparents back home have obviously the lost experience of how they imagined it would be for them having the grandchildren handy, all right? But then the fact that the sons and daughters that are away, without a doubt, guilt of the left behind family is the strongest emotion that they feel. But what I've found in my research, and that's what's inspired me to write these books, is the fact that when I talk to the distance parents and distance grandparents back home, and I say to them, do you know that the guilt of the left behind family is the strongest emotion your kids feel and experience?
Yeah, really.
They look at me as if, really? They don't know. I'm here to tell them. I've decided that's my life task, because I want to fill those gaps of those emotional voids and that information that's not shared. And in reverse, I get the same emotional messages from grandparents. And these are things, this is what they don't share. This is what they don't tell their kids. Over and over and over again, they say to me, they never make their bed. Now, this sounds pathetic, but for 49 weeks of the year, that guest room is pretty neat and tidy. May not be dusted every week, but, it's pretty neat and tidy. And then for 3 weeks of the year, it's a bomb site. And they don't want to complain because it seems really petty.
Yes.
But over and over again, I get that. Other things are nobody ever thanks me. They think about the present, they send something over, or they don't, if they've lost the reply button on the email. And that I get over and over again. And these things are just little things. They're not important enough to raise. They don't want to make a big song and dance about it.
I'm guilty of a couple of those things.
So I figure someone needs to tell everybody what's in the gaps. So that's the whole point of my book series, is with the understanding, with knowledge comes understanding, with understanding comes empathy, with empathy is a good thing for distance families. So all these in-between things, nobody's telling them, nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'm just so excited that you tell us about your series of your books, and where I know that we can find them on Amazon, and I'm currently listening on Audible. So tell us about your 3 books.
Okay. I started with doing my master's to sort of get into this researching groove, and I did that around distance grandparenting in New Zealand. And when I looked around the world, there was next to nothing there for the mainstream reader on the subject. And considering nations like, for example, New Zealand, 20% of people born in New Zealand now live overseas. It's a massive statistic. That means 20% of grandparents here have their grandchildren are in other locations, and we're in a time zone all by ourselves. So every child is in a plane 3 hours at least in another time zone. So, there was this huge void. So I didn't want it to be necessarily a how-to book, because I figure we're all quite intelligent to figure that out. What I wanted was to fill the gaps of information to help each generation adjust in their role, so what they do is as effective as possible. So being the distance grandparent is all about it from the grandparent's perspective, but I keep throwing in bits and bobs about how it is for the son and daughter as well. I want them to know that. So if for example, one of your listeners relates to the 3 H's, the harmful, human, and helpful communication, the best thing they could do is get a copy of the book themselves, a grandparent book, read it, and then give it to their parents and say, I've read this book. I now understand more how it is for you, and I would love you to have a copy. And let's hope they get to page 109 and read about that. So then I wanted the grandparents to understand how it is for their sons and daughters who've gone away, and all the things that they're coping with that they don't necessarily share. So that is being the distant son and daughter. Now, I admit I'm not that person. I'm not that person. But,
But you're in relationships with those people. All your children are those people. So you know these people.
And before I tackled this, I spent hours and hours and hours listening to all the podcasts like yourselves and getting my headspace in there. So I feel I have a pretty good understanding of how it is for them. So that was the whole point of that. So I talk about, TCKs and all, repatriation and all these heavy going things. And I acknowledge the fact that there's, the nomadic expats who are moving from place to place. And then there's the expat migrants like my kids who are permanently living somewhere and married someone from another nation. So and it's a lot about, what happens when mum and dad decline at home, and what happens, how do I cope with that from a distance, that sort of thing. And then my last book is Being a Distance Grandchild, and that is a project on my desk still right now. And I did say it was coming out this year, but I'm going to say next year right now. This one is so wonderful. I have had the most amazing experience, and I'll tell you why. It's because nobody has asked distant grandchildren, past or present,
Yeah.
how is it or how was it being a distant grandchild?
Wow.
There is zero research. So when I talk with them, they go, nobody's ever asked me that. It's opened up this whole thing, this whole Aladdin's cave. You've really got me thinking. And I have been privileged to some of the most precious conversations. I'm just so honored. So that book is a project that's happening. And I'm delighted because there is zero academic reference, scholarship on the topic. There's lots about being a TCK, but not about being the grandchild aspect of that whole package, because nobody asked them where they'd like to live.
Well, on that note, do you have any closing thoughts on the subject, or do you have one keynote piece of advice that is uniquely at the heart of this that we can leave our listeners with today?
I think for the grandparents, they have to realize that they raise their kids to be great people and to take on the world, and that's exactly what they've done.
Yeah.
And I think for the sons and daughters and family away, they need to keep remembering that this was their choice, not the choice of everyone back home, including their sisters or brothers who are minding the fort and might be looking after their parents more or whatever. And just to keep that in mind. Keep it in mind, it is their choice to go, and everybody wants them to have the best time and to have a wonderful life. But just to keep it in mind that was not the reality of what the ones at home thought it was going to be. But they want the best for you.
Thank you, Helen. This is wonderful. So I guess that means a geographical move doesn't have to be an automatic family disaster. That's one of your quotes. And it's a very inspiring message. I would like to refer our readers, our listeners, to the show notes where we will have all the links to Helen's books and where you can find her and connect with her for more information on how you can heal the distance between yourself, your sons and daughters, and your grandparents in the midst of a distance relationship. Thank you so much, Helen.
Thank you so much for having me, Doreen. It's just been a real joy, real joy. Thank you.